Um, Happy April 4th, Thursday. I'm curious. I usually ask where in the world you are. Today, why don't you share if you are going to be in the path of the solar eclipse on Monday? Just as something different if you have solar eclipse plans. I'm very excited about it. So it's very much on my mind. We are, of course, here not to talk about the wonders of the natural world, but about Talmud, though that might sometimes be about the wonders of the natural world. I'm Rachel Scheinerman. This class is hosted by My Jewish Learning, and this morning to spend a half an hour steering us around the last week in the Talmud in Baba Metzia, we have Rabbi Ari Sachs. Rabbi Sachs, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and so excited to be joining you again for learning for today. The rundown that we have of our Talmud learning for Daf Yomi for this past week is Bava Metzia pages 30 through 36. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch by kind of naming some of the main topics that appear here. Not all of them. It's not going to be an exhaustive list. And then from there, I thought it might be fun to share some fun kind of witticisms from the rabbis, because I found some really interesting quotes or interesting teachings from the rabbis here that I thought it might be fun just to kind of share. And then we're going to get into the meat of the lesson having to do with the importance of Torah verses and of what we have in the Torah for the rabbis of the Talmud, meaning what is the role that Torah, the written Torah, plays within the context of the oral Torah. So just in terms of a quick rundown, we have caring for lost garments. We have conversations about people's dignity. We have the role of what does it mean to return an object, also animals, to its owner. And then the role of people in terms of unloading the burden of an animal and also loading the burden upon an animal. A very interesting conversation there about if caring for animals, Tsar Baalei Chayim, is a law from the Torah or it's a rabbinic law. And to what extent do we not care about animals compared when they come into contact with caring for other human beings? We also have the importance of scholars, in particular as well, the relationship of an individual between them and their father and them and their teacher. We have disagreements on issues regarding loans. So anybody involved in real estate or in any kind of loan-based industry, I think that this topic is really interesting, and you should take a look at in depth some of the teachings from this past week's lesson on that topic. And along those lines, false oaths. Because, people try to do their best, but sometimes they just say the wrong thing, or maybe they're intentionally trying to harm you, and you want to be able to protect yourself from that. So that's kind of a rundown of some of the main topics. Obviously, there are more. Here are some quotes that I found from the text itself that I thought really fascinating. One, a positive mitzvah does not override...
Rabbi Sachs, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Did you have a source sheet you wanted to get up for people?
Yeah, I just emailed it to you, actually.
Okay.
I emailed it to you so you can share it as a PDF. And then I also have a source sheet that I'm going to share on the screen when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah. So everyone's going to have a source sheet for the majority of the class. Don't worry about that. The couple of my favorite quotes from this text, from this section. One is, a positive mitzvah does not override a prohibition. So, for instance, if you would want to observe Shabbat and to celebrate it by doing something that you're prohibited from doing, you're actually not allowed to do that, even though it's a positive mitzvah to observe Shabbat. More important from the perspective of the Talmud, that you do not override a prohibition that they lay out. This was an interesting one. From the quote from the text from Torah, where it says, "There shall be no needy among you," we would think that would mean, okay, that you have to take care of the poor of the city. It actually, according to on page 30b, it says, "There shall be no needy among you. Therefore, your assets take precedence over assets of another person." Meaning that better that you keep yourself out of the poorhouse as opposed to putting yourself in the poorhouse by taking care of someone else. An interesting way of thinking about what does it mean to care for a larger society by taking care of yourself first. This is a good one. If in case anybody, like, let's say you lost a garment, let's say you found a garment, you thought it was beautiful, but it's not yours. you're not supposed to spread a lost garment in front of guests because it is tantamount to burning that garment, either due to the evil eye that will result, saying like, "Oh, look at this beautiful piece of of like this sculpture, this beautiful garment I'm laying out in front of you, and I'm just saying how awesome it is, and even though it's not mine, I'm laying it out, saying how great am I for having it." Or due to the temptation of your guests to actually steal it, because they're saying, "Well, it's not yours, so I might take it because I'm going to enjoy it." So anytime that we take advantage of a situation where we are not the owner of something, and we just kind of flout it in front of someone else, we can lead them astray. This is also an interesting one. It talks a little bit about the angel of death, in terms of the angel of death coming for a cow that has died in different places, and where it dies is important for us as human beings. But for the angel of death, what difference to me does it make where the cow is? They're going to die anyway, and my job is to take care of that. So it more think about the angel of death's points than necessarily about us. Then there is, this is one of my favorites. Any judge who does not rule in accordance with this halacha, they're not a judge. I can just imagine a rabbi saying, "Well, if you don't agree with me, then you're not a good rabbi." Kind of like that sort of personal attack against someone, that my law is the law, and if you say anything different, then it's not true. I just thought it was as a rabbi, I thought that was a very funny line. And sometimes, unfortunately, people take it a little too seriously. Then there's this line, which I think is appropriate for all of us here studying Talmud, and also is important in thinking about what I'm going to be talking about in terms of the role of that verses play. And that is, this comes from 33a. The sages taught, for those who engage in the study of Bible, it is a virtue, but not a complete virtue. For those who engage in the study of Mishnah, it is a virtue and they receive reward. But for those who study Talmud, you have no greater virtue than that. So yashar koach to everyone here, because you're engaging in a virtue that is greater than all other virtues of Torah learning. So that also speaks to the importance of what Talmud does, or what Talmud is. We've talked before about, or when I've been here, about the importance of understanding the orality of Talmud, that it was traditions passed down from one to the other. You can see that orality in the way that the text is constructed, but you can also see it in the way in which the oral law, the Talmud, really comes, or what its relationship is with the written Torah, meaning with what we consider to be the Torah that was written by Moses, or written down by Moses, the 5 books of Torah, but also extended to all of Tanakh. And there is a particular phrase that is shared, I should say, that is, I'm just going to get to the right page here. There's a particular Talmudic terminology that is used in describing, I'm going to do it this way. Everybody can see it on the page. Specific terminology.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you again. I've been trying to figure out how I can share a PDF in Zoom. I've never done that before, and it looks like our account doesn't permit that. Is this the same as the PDF that I've been trying to figure out how to share?
Let me do it this way. I will take, I'm actually going to put right now into the chat, I'm going to put the actual link. So people want to see it, you can see it this way. Okay?
Okay. Is this Safari source sheet the same as the PDF that I've been trying to?
Yes, it is the same one.
Okay. So everybody, there's only one source sheet, and this is it. And now it's on Rabbi Saxon shared on the screen, and there is also a link in the chat now. So everyone should have access either by viewing on the screen or by going to the chat for the link. Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
No problem. Okay. So there's a particular phrase that is used, or Talmudic terminology that is used as a way of expressing that there's a relationship between what the rabbis are discussing and Torah, and the verses from Torah. And that phrase is Minah Hane Mile. Minah Hane Mile, which appears pretty frequently. It is, from where do we derive these things? And what's particular about Minahani Mile, as you can see in the definition here, is that it is used in order to say where in the Torah do we find this particular teaching. Now, that teaching could be used as what's called an asmachta, which means as a support for an idea, or it could be used to find what the actual source is. Because what's so interesting about Talmud overall, especially given its orality, is that the rabbis are interpreting the words of Torah sometimes without invoking those words of Torah. And there are times in which the rabbis of the Talmud want to bring in the words of Torah to show that they're not just making it up, that it comes from someplace. But what they're also doing by that is allowing the words of Torah to, or I should say, to connect their teachings with words of Torah so as to give them a greater role as the authoritative voice of what Judaism has to say for its day. So there is an important relationship between the rabbis of the Talmud and their job of expressing, here's what Judaism must say about our issues of today, with words of Torah that come from a different time period but are also eternal, and that those words are done in order to help the rabbis assert their authority as the correct interpreters of what Judaism has to say in that day. And there are different ways in which that kind of role of interpreters plays itself out in the Talmud, and in particular does it in a few different ways in our section or in Baba Metzia that I thought would be interesting to share. So here's the first one. This is a verse from Deuteronomy 21:3. Now, this verse does not appear directly in our text, but is referenced in our text only by virtue of Sefaria's great translation and the work of Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz can we be able to easily understand that the piece of Talmud in Bava Metzia is referencing this verse, and that it gives us it directly and that we can find it. We don't have to search for it. But to know that if you look at the original Hebrew or Aramaic of the Talmud, it doesn't reference the entire verse. It just references a specific word or specific section that it's talking about, assuming that you know where that verse comes from. So if you are, it's almost as if in order to know Talmud, you have to know the entire Talmud and to know the entire Bible. You have to know all these different things just to know what they're referencing, because they don't always give you the full reference. But thank God, with the wonders of technology, we have the ability to be able to do that. So here it is. The verse is, the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall then take a heifer which has never been worked, which has never pulled in a yoke. Now, the purpose of this verse, or I should say the context of this verse, has a lot to do with the rules regarding bringing when there is a dead person found on the road and whose responsibility is to take care of it. But what it's also referencing here, kind of as a side point, is actually the killing of a heifer. Now, a heifer can only be brought to, or a red heifer can only be brought to be sacrificed if it is pure. The definition of what it means for it to be pure are that it has never been worked and it has never been pulled in a yoke. What does that really mean, though? Or what is the significance of that? And why is it important for what we're about to look at? Take a look at the highlighted part of the text. There is a particular phrase that's going to be overanalyzed in so many ways that I just think it's beautiful, because I love the Talmudic analysis of phrases from Torah. The phrase is, lo ubadba, has never been worked. Now, if you're able to follow the Hebrew, ubad, ayin bet dalid, comes from the word root avad, meaning to work. However, the vocalization of ubad is In a passive form, it has never been worked because there is what's called a shuruk, which is the three kind of dot vowel on the diagonal underneath the ayin, and that makes it a passive form. Let's remember though, Torah does not have vowels. There is no vocalization of the biblical text until rabbis came and actually formulated the vowels in a period known as the from a group known as the Masoretes, who actually took a tradition of how to read the text and then put that tradition into vowel form and then created a version of how to read the biblical text that does not actually have the vowels. Why is that important here? Because the traditional, or I should say, the normative way of reading a word, reading the word Ayin Bet Dalid, meaning avad, meaning to work, would mean that meaning is that it works, or I should say, it's in an active form. It's not in a passive form. If it was in a passive form, we would expect there to be a vav between the ayin and the bet to say ubad. So why is it written in an active form but read in a passive form? That question becomes very relevant to one of our sugyot here in the Talmud that we're going to look at right now. So, if a bird rested upon a red heifer, it remains fit for use in the purification ritual, as supporting the bird on its back is considered neither labor nor comparable to pulling a yoke. I'm reminded of a book I read to my kids, in which the book is about two animals who can speak. One of is an elephant, and the other animal is a pig. And the pig says to the elephant, "But there's a bird on your head." And the whole book is about, there's a bird on my head? I never knew there was a bird on my head. To the point of saying, really, a bird on an animal is considered to be work by supporting it? That doesn't seem to be work. And yet at the same time, if we're talking about an animal whose job it is to carry things on its back, well, is there a minimum weight to it? So that's kind of what it means by a bird on its back. It's like the bird just happened to fly on and it creates a little bit of weight. Does that count as work? Well, according to Steinsaltz's explanation of the text, because that's his explanation is in the non-bolded text here, if a bird rests upon the heifer, it's not really work. So therefore, because it has never been worked, it is still able to be brought for a purification ritual. However, if a male animal mounted it for mating, well, that's going to take a little bit more work. It is unfit for use in the purification ritual. So that's kind of the issue at hand. Why is it in one case where you could say the bird just appears, that is considered to be work, that is not considered to be work, and therefore it is allowed to be used for the ritual purification. However, in the case of a male mounting it, well, also that might happen against the will of the animal itself, which that brings up a whole lot of issues about sexual dynamics that we're not going to get into. But at the same time, it means that the animal that we're talking about is a passive participant. They're not necessarily asking for it. It's just happening. And yet that is considered to be work and therefore unfit. So why is that? Why is in one case where it's not work and the other case where it is work? Or I should say not work, but in terms of where it's unfit. And in both cases, it's where it's acted in the passive sense. So here it is. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for the difference between the two cases? The difference is in accordance with statement of Rav Papa. As Rav Papa says, with regard to the verse written concerning the heifer whose neck is broken, and the elders of that city shall take a heifer of the herd that has not been worked with and that it has not pulled a yoke, meaning the verse that we're referring to. If the word were written with an additional letter vav, meaning ubad written with a vav, which would mean the passive, has been worked with ubad, and we also vocalize the word in the passive voice, ubad, I would say that even if the heifer performed labor by itself, it is disqualified for use in the ritual. Meaning, if the word was fully written with the vav, then in any case, if there was work done to it, then it would be unfit. However, he used it for labor, avad, and we also vocalize the word in the active voice, avad. I would say that indicates that the heifer was fit for use in the ritual until its owner intentionally used it for labor. So this is the point it's trying to really that he's trying to make. If the text itself was written and vocalized in the passive form, then it would mean that it would be disqualified for the use in the ritual, even if it was done to them without their acceptance of it, meaning it wasn't done by virtue of any kind of active choice by the ox or by the heifer, and what we're really talking about is by the owner of the heifer, because it's the owner who decides what the heifer is actually going to do. So that means that in a passive sense, it would be fit for sacrifice. However, if it was written as avad, meaning in that active way, and if it was only written, and if it was vocalized as avad, then we know that the only time it's considered to be unfit is if it was done in an active way by virtue of the owner choosing that the heifer should act in this particular way. Thus, we have the issue here is that avad is what the way it's written, that active language, and it is pronounced in a passive form, which seems to mess with this idea of in what case is it allowed to be used for sacrifice, and in which case is it not allowed to be used for sacrifice. However, now that the word is written without an additional letter vav as avad, and we vocalize the word with an additional letter vav as ubad, in order to render the heifer unfit, we require the situation described by the word ubad to be similar to the situation described by the word avad. Or to put another way, we need to find out how the passive and the active, how those two things can actually be the same thing, so that we can learn in what cases is a red heifer fit or unfit to be used. And here's how he's describing it. Here's how he understands the reason why we have it written as an active, and it is as written as an active and is pronounced as vocalized as a passive. Just as the word avad indicates that the owner is amenable to the performance of that labor, so too the word ubad means that the owner is amenable to the performance of that labor. So it's not just about the fact that the labor is happening, or it is that it is done in an active way or in a passive way. It means specifically it has to do with the will of the owner in terms of what happens to that heifer. Since the owner is amenable to the heifer mating, the heifer is rendered unfit. So too in the first clause of the Breita. If one introduced a calf into a yoke so that it may suckle, and it threshed with the cows, it is fit for use in the ritual of the heifer whose neck is broken, because the owner is not amenable to his performing labor. That has to do with the previous part of the Gemara that I did not bring, with just what brought up this question. But really what it's kind of saying is that when it comes to the bird resting upon the heifer, well, the bird, the owner is like, shoo away, bird. I don't want you to be on here. So even if we do consider that to be labor, it's that the choice of that labor was not made by the owner of the heifer. Now, I brought other sources or other examples from this particular Gemara about the nature of the Hebrew text, and in particular about why there's a repetition of words, why that there's back and forth, about not back and forth, I'm sorry, but that there's an emphasis by saying Hashev Teshivem, or Azor Ta'azreni, in which those double words have different meanings attached to them. But I just wanted to bring this one as the main one, and that's all we have time for today, because I think what's so fascinating about it is that it takes this idea of what the text of the Torah says, and it plays, and especially Rav Papa plays with it to the point where, by virtue of the way in which we've changed how it's written to fit an oral tradition of how it's read, it changes the meaning of that word to fit in with a rabbinic understanding of the law that they're trying to explain. That is to say, that when it comes to the study of Gemara, what we're really understanding is how rabbis understand what Jewish law has to say. And we're also getting a way in to how they interpret text from the Torah to fit their way, or to fit what they want to say about that particular law. Talmud is not the interpretation of Torah. Talmud is the interpretation of Jewish life that is supported by rabbinic understanding of what Torah has to say. And I think that that point is really what this study is all about. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about what life is like for us. And we go to sources to see how those sources play out with, or I should say, how those sources play out in our lives, and to recognize that these sources are interpreted through our hearts, through our minds, through our souls. Sometimes we may focus a little too much on what we need or what we want and not allow the text to speak for itself. But the truth is, the text can never speak for itself. The text can only speak through the words of people who study it. And I think that ultimately through people who love it, who are passionate about it, and who want those words to bring out the beauty of life in this world for all of us.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sachs. I think it is really one thing this brought up for me. I've thought about this many times over the years, and one thing this brought up for me today was just that I've sometimes been involved in like Jewish Christian dialogue, and I find that like we could talk about our theological differences, and that's easy to define, but hard to like figure out where you go from there. But one thing I've always found really interesting to do with in Jewish Christian dialogue spaces is to talk about how we read text, because the Jewish way of reading text is so marvelous and so interesting and so different. And it's and of course some of these texts are sacred for both of us. So it's like it's really kind of a fun way to approach that. Mm-hmm. I realize that was a bit of a tangent, but that's what it brought up.
I think it's beautiful. And also, I mean, I also think that I saw just one comment as it was coming up, which speaks to that point about how sometimes it seems as if we're choosing random verses to come up with an interpretation that fits. Yeah. And in fact, what's so beautiful about that is what it means is that we're taking verses from the same corpus of text, from a same larger group of texts that, and by the way, when it comes to all the different monotheistic faith traditions, even though Islam does not use the Hebrew Bible in the same way that, let's say, Christianity holds the Hebrew Bible, that it still brings in many of the stories and many of the teachings that emanate from the Bible. And therefore, we have a corpus of text that we can all share. Maybe like this one's more important, or that one's more important, or this one is whatever it may be. We draw this one out. I find that the argument over which text is more important less significant than the fact that we're drawing from this text still today. And that's what's so important. Even if it might seem random to one, it is still holy because we've ascribed holiness to it. And that's also why I think we come back to it as well, because it gives us a foundation of being a part of something larger.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for your comments and questions. We are at time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the meeting on that lovely note. It was great to see you all. I hope you all have a Shabbat Shalom, and we will be back here next week. All right. Bye, everyone.
Take care.